Welcome to the Healing While Discovering Yourself podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Michelle. I'm an intuitive transformational coach, certified life coach, certified NLP practitioner, and speaker. I've spent the last 22 plus years helping myself and my clients learn how to create their own happiness and live more abundant lives. In this time, I've also overcome and healed from child sexual molestation, a compulsive eating disorder, hunger, and homelessness. Now it's your turn to move forward with your life and heal from childhood traumas or past experiences. In this podcast, I'll share how I was able to overcome all of my past struggles, as well as my personal stories of overcoming jealousy, loneliness, resentment, and bitterness, and how I learned to forgive. I'll also help you explore your shadow self, deal with having low or no self-esteem, and address feelings of not being worthy or loved. Using my personal experiences and extensive training, as well as stories of grief, loss, depression, and anxiety from my guests, I'll help you change your life and finally heal. Hey, love. Did you ever have to mediate the conflicts between your parents when you were growing up? Or did you have to take care of or live in the house with a parent who was ill, or did you face any illness as a child? If so, then there is a possibility that you may not have been able to have the childhood that you had wished that you had. You know, the ones that you saw on TV. Well, I want to invite you to my 90-minute powerful workshop called How to Grieve the Loss of Your Childhood, Surviving Childhood Trauma. Did you know that childhood trauma is more common than you think? And about 70% of adults across 6 continents have reported at least one traumatic experience in their lives. But guess what? Your trauma does not have to be a source of shame. And that's why I would love for you to join me in this powerful workshop, How to Grieve the Loss of Your Childhood, Surviving Childhood Trauma. In this workshop, I'm going to share with you 3 steps for you to begin grieving and continue on your healing journey. We're going to talk about how trauma impacts all of us, what it means to actually grieve the loss of your childhood, and I'm going to discuss the major difference between big T and little t trauma, as well as potential sources of trauma. In addition to all of that, there's going to be a live Q&A at the end to make sure that I answer all of your questions. If this sounds interesting to you, or if you know that there's some childhood trauma that you are ready to release, then I would love for you to join me in this powerful 90-minute workshop. Hey, loves. Welcome back to another episode of the Healing While Discovering Yourself podcast. If you are new here, welcome. I am always so glad that you decide to hit play, that you decide to listen, that you decide to give the Healing While Discovering Yourself podcast an opportunity to pour into your life or share things with you that perhaps you may not have known, or things that you've known, and just provide a different perspective. I am so honored. So thank you for being here, and welcome to all new and old. So today I want to talk to you about something that what's interesting is that I learned about this probably a few months before I enrolled in my PhD program. For those of you who don't know, I am currently in school in a doctoral program for developmental psychology with an emphasis on childhood and adolescence. And so I learned about this thing a few months before I enrolled in the program. And then once I got into the doctoral program, I was just like, wait, how is it that I've never learned anything about this, except now that I am in this PhD program, I'm learning like all about it. It's everywhere. But I also fundamentally believe that everything happens in the timing that it's supposed to happen. And so when I first learned about attachment styles, which is what we're going to be talking about today, I was just so blown away. I can't even remember what book I was reading. Well, actually, I was listening to a book because a lot of my reading I do on through Audible. And I love it because it allows me to actually take in more information than I would if I were actually sitting down reading a physical book. Now, there are some books that I actually do prefer a physical copy. And there are actually a lot of books where I have both Audible and the physical copy. But anyway, this is not about books. This is about attachment style. So I don't remember what book I was reading, but I remember being out on a run and hearing about attachment styles. And I was like, whoa, this is so crazy. And then, like I said, when I got into the program, learning like the foundation, who developed it, where it started from, what exactly it is and how it impacts us today, I was just so attracted to it. So much so that I actually created a quiz on discovering what your attachment style is. Now, the quiz that I have currently is based on what your attachment style is now, and not necessarily what your attachment style was as a child, because your attachment style can change as you develop more and go through your life and experience more, because I had an anxious attachment style as a child. And for a number of reasons, I am number two of six children. I actually had a brother who passed away at 3 months old, over 30, of SIDS. Back then we called it crib death. This was 38 years ago. So I'm number two of six children, and each of us, we are what they call stair-step children. And what that means is like 1 year, we're basically anywhere between 11 and 13 months apart. So I am 13 months younger than my older sister. And then I am 11 months older than my brother. And there's two girls and 3 boys. There were 4 boys. So all of us are either 11 to 13 months apart. You can say my mama and daddy, they were quite busy, quite busy back then, but it is what it is. So I had an anxious attachment style because I just didn't get what I needed as a child. And, when I consider it as a mother myself, how could I get what I needed as a child when my mother had, a 1-year-old? Then there was me. And before I had even turned 1, my brother was born. So she basically had 3 children under the age of 2, right? If you think about it, my sister was 2. She had just turned 2. I was about to turn 1, but then my mother had my brother. So I was 11 months, and then my brother was, an infant. So she basically, again, had 3 children under the age of 2. So how could I get what I need? And so the same thing is true for my younger brothers. But this is about me. And so all of us experience things differently. However, as I have, developed throughout my life and, learned more via the corporate world, via academia, my education, I have my master's in business administration. And before becoming a full-time entrepreneur, I spent 15 years successfully climbing the corporate ladder, building relationships. I have moved from an anxious attachment style to a secure attachment style. And again, this is based on my experience and my own personal development, investing in coaches and therapists, and just a number of things to actually move me from an anxious attachment style to a secure attachment style. So with that being said, I just want to talk to you, briefly. I don't want to go too in depth because this is actually episode number 1 of a series that's actually focused on attachment style. So make sure you stay tuned to the podcast to learn more in-depth information about each attachment style and really how it impacted you as a child and how it impacts you as an adult. So today it's just basically like a brief overview of what an attachment style is. And then as the weeks go on, we will go into more specifically each attachment style and how it impacts you today. So again, today is just a brief overview. So I really don't plan on spending much time before you. And then what's not necessarily clear by the time I finish this episode, then I'm going to invite you to join my private Facebook healing community, Healing While Discovering Yourself, named after the podcast to make it easy for you, where I go live on Fridays for Coffee Talks with Andrea. And it's where I answer all of your questions surrounding whatever the week's podcast topic is. So if you hear something, please do make sure you join us in the Healing While Discovering Yourself private Facebook community to get your questions answered. And stay tuned because I may answer the questions in subsequent episodes and I may not, but the best thing to do is to just join the private Facebook community to get your questions answered. And if you want to join, you can either go to Facebook and search Healing While Discovering Yourself, or you can go to andreamichelle.com/groups. All right. So what is an attachment style? So first of all, John Bowlby, who was a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a psychoanalyst, he was the one who proposed the theory of attachment around 1958. And he described an attachment style as a lasting psychological connection between human beings. And John Bowlby actually believed that attachment was necessary for our survival, which makes it a part of an evolutionary theory, if you will. Other ways that we can define an attachment are, it's a deep, long-lasting emotional bond between two people, which seeks closeness and security. And at the very least, an infant needs to develop a relationship with at least one caregiver, right? So that's important when we consider attachment styles. And it's also important when we consider the implications that, our attachment style has on us now as adults. So how is our attachment style developed? First of all, it's important to know that an attachment is a reciprocal. I know how to talk. Reciprocal. I know how to talk. I promise you I do. It's a reciprocal relationship between two people. And this relationship, if you will, it begins with a parent-child relationship. And when I talk about like parent-child relationship, it could also be a child-caregiver relationship. It doesn't necessarily have to be a parent like the mother or the father. And the caregiver could be a parent. It's most likely a parent, and it's most likely the mother, just because the mother is the one giving birth, but not necessarily true. It could be obviously parents, grandparents, nannies, babysitters, childcare providers. It can be anyone who spends time with the child. And so the attachment style that we develop, it actually extends into other relationships. And that's why it's important to understand what attachment styles are and what your attachment style is now. I mean, if you want to take it a step back, you can take time to discover what your attachment style was as a child versus what it is now, or you can just simply say, this is what it is now and move forward. Most people experience all four attachment styles, which we'll get into later. Some people carry the same attachment style as a child into adulthood. And then some people do like I did, which you have one attachment style and move to another attachment style. Now, I happen to move from an insecure attachment style, which is an anxious attachment style, to a secure attachment style. However, there are people who can move from a secure attachment style as a child to an insecure attachment style. So there's the secure attachment style, and then there are three different insecure attachment styles. So whatever your style is, it extends to other relationships. Whether it changes or not, it depends on your journey of healing and your journey of self-discovery. So, attachment is formed with the person who accurately responds to the needs of the child, not the one who spends the most time with the child, right? So let me say that again. Our attachment style is formed based on the individual that meets the needs of the child, not the one who spends the most time with the child, right? So that means that it's based on the amount of time, obviously that's important, and the quality and the responsiveness of the caregiver. And again, the caregiver could be the mother, could be the father, could be a nanny, could be a babysitter, could be a childcare provider. And these are all and. So it's based on the time, the quality and responsiveness, and the emotional investment, right? How emotionally invested is the caregiver in the child? And then lastly, the presence of the caregiver or the person in the child's life over time. Right. So that's how it's developed. And that's why it doesn't necessarily matter how much time you spend with the child, because surely we know people who spend so much time with their children, but yet their children are insecurely attached, right? And we know people who spend very little time with their children, yet they're sensitive to their needs, they're emotionally invested, and they have a secure attachment style. That's why I don't necessarily worry about how much time, or even when my kids were younger, I didn't worry about how much time I spent with them, but it was the quality of the time that mattered to me. And this is before I even knew about attachment style. I just always felt that spending quality time with them was more important than spending all day with them not doing anything, right? And so it's important to know that time means little, very little in terms of attachment style if you are not accurately and efficiently and sensitively meeting the needs of the child, right? And again, we're talking about how attachment styles are formed or how they're developed. And, it's important to know your attachment style, because your attachment style, again, when this is talking from a developmental perspective, your attachment style influences your physical, your neurological, your cognitive, your emotional, and your psychological development, right? It informs or it influences all of that physical, cognitive, emotional, psychological, neurological. It influences that development. And what I've learned, especially with being in this doctoral program, is that development is continuous. We are always developing and changing and growing. And so even if you think, well, Andrea, I'm an adult now, what this got to do with anything, you are still influencing, your attachment style is still currently influencing your development, right? It plays a role in your cognitions, your how you think, right? Your memory, your ability to remember things. It's so important. And also our attachment styles, it determines our level of trust or mistrust. And that's so important for us to remember, to know, and to understand, because a lot of people have mistrust issues and they're not sure where they came from. Well, I can assure you that a lot of your mistrust issues came from your childhood. Right. And that's something for you to remember and to know that, that's why it's important to understand and know what your attachment style is. And then, lastly, our attachment styles, they shape how we view and how we relate to the world and how we form our friendships. So our attachment style, it impacts how we view and how we relate to the world and how we form other relationships, right? So it's not enough that it impacts us, or it's more than enough that it impacts us neurologically, psychologically, and emotionally, but yet it informs how we look at the world, even at 20, 30, and 40 years old, right? The way we form our relationships is based on the style of attachment that we developed in infancy and in childhood, and how we have since then developed, how we have decided to heal ourselves, how we've decided to go on the self-discovery journey. That's all important. And so it's important for you to know what your attachment style is. And really quickly, I'm going to tell you the 4 attachment styles and then tell you to stay tuned because I'm going to break down what each of these attachment styles are. And you can join me in Coffee Talks with Andrea in the private Facebook group, or again, you can stay tuned to to listen to the rest of the podcast episodes on what these attachment styles are. So there are 4 attachment styles. And each of these attachment styles, if you dig deeper, they have like subcategories. So I'm just going to share the main attachment styles. I shared with you that there is the secure attachment style, and then there are 3 insecure attachment styles. So obviously there is secure attachment. There is anxious avoidant attachment. There's anxious resistant attachment. And then there is disorganized attachment. So a secure attachment means that your needs as a child were met, in a timely and effective and efficient manner. And there was truly a reciprocal relationship between you and your caregiver. Again, the caregiver can be your babysitter, nanny, your mother. It doesn't matter. It's the person who you are, who meets your needs, who attended to your needs emotionally and efficiently. An anxious avoidant attachment style is when the child basically avoids interaction with the caregiver. That means that the caregiver did not necessarily attend to their needs in a timely manner. The anxious resistant attachment style is formed or developed, or it represents the child not necessarily being angry when the parent returns, right? And I'm being very simplistic for a reason, because I don't want it to overwhelm you. And I always encourage my listeners and my clients to please do your own research. Like, do not ever take my word for something, because I am always evolving. The things that I believed, even last year, I don't believe them today, not because there was something wrong with my beliefs or I'm a fickle person, but because I get more information, right? And when we receive new information, that's an opportunity for us to stop and evaluate where we are now, and then ask ourselves, hey, do I still believe this? And if we don't believe it, then we can, decide to believe something else. And then lastly, disorganized attachment is basically when the caregiver was not around at all. They were inconsistent in the way that they responded and treated you. And therefore the infant or the child also, even today, is confused in the way that they respond to people. So again, this was very briefly. Continue to listen to the Healing While Discovering Yourself podcast. And I am going to go in greater detail for each of these attachment styles, and then also share with you how these attachment styles impact you today. Because again, you may be saying, I'm grown, I'm an adult, I'm not a child anymore, Andrea, but that doesn't mean that it's not important for you to understand what your attachment style is, because believe it or not, it does play a role in, like I said, the way you see the world and how you form your relationships. And not only that, it still impacts you cognitively, developmentally, emotionally, psychologically, neurologically, like it impacts you. So thank you so much for just being here, just hitting play. I so appreciate you. And again, I'm going to ask you to stay tuned, because we are going to continue this discussion in our series of attachment styles. So as I go, just know that the love in me salutes the love in you. Bye-bye. Hey loves, are you looking for a safe place to hang out while you're healing with other like-minded individuals? If so, then I would love for you to join my private Facebook community called Healing While Discovering Yourself, named after the podcast. This community is for those who are truly seeking a safe place to heal and also show up authentically. If this interests you, then I'm going to invite you to go to Facebook/groups/Healing While Discovering. I look forward to seeing you in the group. What would you do if you knew that in 5 minutes you could take back control of your life, calm your nerves, and shift into your power? You would take advantage of that offer, wouldn't you? Well, I would love to share with you my proprietary The More method. It's a method that I use every day to help me take back control of my life and master my inner world. See, I don't know if anyone has ever told you, but you are not just a physical being. You are not just a spiritual being. You are a multi-dimensional being. And that means that you are spiritual, you are mental, you are emotional, and you are physical. The More method is designed to help you truly take back control of your life and master your inner world, every area of your inner world, so that you can show up authentically and unapologetically. Go to themoremethod.co. Again, that's themoremethod.co to download the video and amazing guide to show you how to take back control of your life and master your inner world in as little as 5 minutes a day.